So Melissa, if you want to come on up, and let's give Melissa a warm Valley Baptist welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
My name is Melissa Franks. I'm a recovering judgmental control freak, people pleaser, pessimist, and perfectionist. I had an emptiness that could not be filled, and I was angry all the time. I am sharing my testimony to show you God's sovereign, almighty power and purpose. Growing up, with my single mom and granny raised me in a small town in Oklahoma, and I'm the oldest of 3 girls. My religious background was very limited. I started at a Seventh-day Adventist church, and when I was 11, I was in a summer program at a Baptist church and got saved and baptized. I didn't know what baptism was about, but I knew that's what you did. When I was 13, we moved to Bakersfield. I was a good student and rarely got into trouble. About halfway through my freshman year, I met a guy and I thought I was totally in love. For about 6 months, after about 6 months, I was sneaking out of the house, lying to my mom, and practically stopped going to school. I started running away and disrupting our home. My mom moved us across town and put me in a different school to get me away from him, but it didn't change anything. So halfway through my sophomore year, I was sent to live with my granny back in Oklahoma, but I stayed in contact with them. When my sophomore year was over, my granny brought me back to Bakersfield, and within a few days, I ran away and was drinking and smoking weed and doing drugs and staying in a hotel room with my boyfriend. That's when I got pregnant. When my sophomore year, I tried to just ignore being pregnant for a few months. I had gone back to my mom's house. I was scared to tell anyone. When I finally told my boyfriend, he flipped out. He wanted me to get rid of it. I didn't want an abortion. I made appointments and canceled them. I was depressed and lost, and I had no idea what to do and no one to talk to. I ended up at the Crisis Pregnancy Center, and the counselor talked to me about adoption. She actually came home with me and helped me to tell my mom. But my mom wanted me out of her house. I moved into Aunt Sherry's home for unwed mothers and applied for assistance at about 5 to 6 months into my pregnancy. By this time, it was too late for an abortion, at least I thought so, and I was planning on adoption. My boyfriend was in and out of my life, but it was extremely rocky. He was physically and verbally abusive. He told me every day I was worthless and no one would ever love me, and I had no one to turn to. I attempted suicide at his house by taking his dad's diabetes medicine. He found me and he took me back to Aunt Sherry's home. I don't have any memory of it, but I laid down on the floor and my blood sugar plummeted. Someone finally noticed me in a pool of urine and called the ambulance. They pumped my stomach and saved both me and my baby. I was then put into 3B, a psychiatric unit at Kern Medical Center. And after 3 days, I was released to my mom since I was only 16. Aunt Sherry's then kicked me out, and I went back to live with my mom. I had to get a job and start independent studies. My mom and I weren't getting along at all, but she tolerated me and she helped me. I was pretty incorrigible. I never thought of God then, but in looking back, I could see how He protected me from everything. On April 20th, I went into labor. They hooked me up to the monitors, but with every contraction, the heartbeat slowed way down. The umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck twice. They rushed me into surgery for an emergency C-section, and I woke up in a hospital room all alone. Since I was planning an adoption already, I hadn't seen the baby and I didn't want to. But my boyfriend showed up, and a nurse just happened to come in and ask me what name to put on the birth certificate. I told her I wasn't gonna name the child and I would let the adoptive parents name the baby. My boyfriend just blew up. He knew I was gonna keep the baby. He stormed out. When he didn't come back, I finally decided to see her. Just once, just for a minute. But once I held her, I knew I couldn't leave her. I named her Constance Marie and gave her my last name. She was perfect, but so small. She was just 5 pounds and 15 ounces. God had protected her through it all. She was God's perfect miracle, and she literally saved my life. After graduating high school, I moved out of my mom's house. I was working a full-time job and carrying a full load FBC with no car and a child to care for. My boyfriend was still in and out, even though he knew I was keeping the baby. I met another guy that I worked with who was also very abusive. At the time, I didn't think I deserved any better. There were so many horrible decisions. I got pregnant 2 more times, and I ended up having abortions. I told myself I couldn't care for another baby. I was barely making it. I needed to make a life for my daughter, and I'd convinced myself that an abortion was going to be okay. For so many years, I felt like a hypocrite and told no one. In July 1992, I turned 21 and started going to the bars, again making horrible decisions. I was dating several guys, but in late August 1992, I met my future husband, Michael. In a bar of all places, God showed up. Within a few weeks, we had gotten to know each other pretty well. He was getting a divorce and had 3 kids. Everything moved fast from there. In October, he got full custody of his 3 children. He then got a DUI and had to quit his job. So by January of 1993, we were moving in together. I went from 1 to 4 kids at the age of 21. Michael became a stay-at-home dad for 1.5 years. Our kids were from 3 to 7. The biggest thing about Michael, though, he wanted us to all go to church together. I wasn't too sure about it because I had so much in my past, and of course we were living in sin. But we went. We were boldly sitting in the very front row with 4 kids. We stood out a little bit. We got involved in church, got into Sunday school groups. We would go to Awanas on Wednesday nights. This is what a mom should do, I thought. We were there whenever the doors were open. Michael got saved immediately, but I gave the pastor a run for his money. When he asked me about getting saved, I said, well, hadn't I already been saved and baptized? Would God really let me into his heaven? I was a horrible person, and of course there were those abortions. Could he forgive me for all of this? I wasn't convinced right away, and I was embarrassed. I eventually...
Just hold it up higher on the shaft. There.
I eventually surrendered my life to Jesus, but I never felt I was good enough even for God. In 1994, Michael got his driver's license back and went back to work. We had very little money, so he sold his prized Mac tool chest and tools to buy me a wedding ring set and proposed to me. He also made my wedding dress. It's it's not just some little chintzy dress. It's made of satin and organza and ribbon, and I've cherished it to this day. We were not able to get married in the church since we were living together, but we were both baptized as a couple on 8/21/94 after we were married. This time, I actually knew what it meant. Things were pretty good for a while. Michael was the most caring husband and father. Both our exes had disappeared, so we raised 2 boys and 2 girls on our own, without any interference. I did everything I could to make a life for us. We were always volunteering in the schools. We were boosters for almost everything. We were busy. And we had a beautiful family. Our oldest daughter, Jennifer, and I had a rocky relationship, though, especially as she got older. She blamed me for coming in between her dad and her mom. I tried to do everything equally for her to show her how much I loved her, but it was never enough. When she was 13, we were arguing and I kicked her. I was arrested and I had to leave the house and eventually went to jail. After anger management, counseling, and court requirements were met, I was able to move back into the house. But after that, we had no relationship at all. I couldn't fix it. Over time, I became a lukewarm Christian. We went to church on Sundays, but drinking, cussing, and barely showing any evidence of Jesus in my life. I was negative. I yelled a lot. My marriage was suffering. My oldest daughter hated me and blocked me from any communication. We eventually stopped going to church. I always thought I was still a Christian. All this time, we were away from God. In 2007, my husband and I started a business, and we were together all the time. God blessed the business and has always provided for us, but we were growing apart. We were distant. We were having major disagreements all the time. Around 2016, I started going to line dancing to get away from the house. It started one night a week, and then it was 3 to 5 nights a week. I was angry with God because my marriage was not working. I kept asking God, why? Is this what God really intends for my life? In 2019, my friend asked me to come to a Bible study on Wednesday mornings at Valley. The first study was Discerning the Voice of God by Priscilla Shirer. We also studied Job, Philippians, and a study on detours. My relationship with God began to change. It wasn't just religion anymore. I joined a women's life group and started going to church. The studies helped me to grow closer to God, and I worked on myself. I realized my brokenness was affecting every aspect of my life. My friend Leslie from line dancing noticed I was coming to church and asked where my husband was. She began nudging him to come too when she would see him at line dancing occasionally. She invited him to CSI Life Group. We continued to attend separate life groups, but we went to service together. Little did I know, these studies and classes and Pastor Roger's sermons over the 2 years were all preparing me for something. My perspective had shifted. It wasn't about me. It was all about God's purpose for me. In March of 2021, in the middle of COVID, I was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. It was on my ovaries, my stomach, my colon, my liver, intestines, and spleen. It had been there so long it had calcified. I had been suffering for years with pain. And we had just changed doctors, and the new doctor figured it out in 1 day. The cancer marker was 5,549. It should have been around 30. He referred to me an oncologist right away, and both doctors have taken care of me through this whole journey. Initially, I had 7 rounds of chemo to start and had surgery in August of 2021. They removed everything, dissected it, and put it all back together. Although I was clear of cancer for a few months after the surgery, the cancer did return, and I have had 8 more rounds of chemo. I don't know what the future holds, but I have committed my way to the Lord in complete faith. This season of life has been hard on my family and friends, and although I cry a lot about it, I have considered this cancer a true blessing. In Job 13:15, he said, "Though he slay me, yet I will hope in him." This is what I realized during my cancer journey. This cancer was no accident. God was already working things out. Through this season, he taught me to be an obedient servant, reliant only on him, and yielding everything to him. James 1:2 says, "Consider it joy whenever you face trials." He has restored my marriage fully in his glory. We've been married for 29 years in July. Michael has been my rock, and he has taken care of me through every step in this cancer journey. God has restored my relationship with our oldest daughter, who hadn't talked to me for 20 years. We had no relationship. She also rededicated her life to the Lord and is very active with church and the youth group. God has opened the doorway for conversations with family that I've never been able to have. I found out my mom's not saved. How do you not know your mom's not saved? She's become my one now. She says she's not ready yet. I have fixed my eyes on Jesus, and I know what it means to have authentic, life-changing, joy-producing faith. Habakkuk 3:18 says, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord, I will be joyful in God my Savior." Through these storms of life, God has empowered me and has used these trials for his glory and purpose. Normally, I don't share all this hurt in me, but God has called me to show how he's changed me. I'm a completely different person than I used to be. Whitney Katz wrote, "We are diminishing God's glory by not being honest and showing what God did in us." I also know who I am now. I'm a servant of God, the daughter of the creator of the universe. I am so blessed to share God's glory with anyone who will listen to me, and it has led me to love outreach, like street ministries, city nights, humbly praying at 40 Days for Life for the abortion clinic. I have been called to reach others for Christ and love on them just like Jesus loves me. Andrew Ripp sings, "If it wasn't for my failures and mistakes, I would never know the depth of his grace." So if God can use this center to further his kingdom, he can use all of us. And I encourage all of you to get involved and to find out if your family is saved. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Great job. That was such a powerful story